Welcome to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practices of Top Performers. I'm Dr. Roy Nadler, Dr. Kathy Greenberg, my host for since 2008, and she and I have been doing this ever since. And why are we doing it? We always want to get people who can help you as a leader. That may mean leading your team, leading yourself. What are the few things that you can do differently? Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. Sometimes we talk about what do you need to dial up as a coach? What do you need to dial down? Identifying some of that. And Kathy and I have helped thousands of leaders in our career to perform in the top 10%. The top 10% is a tipping point. If you can get in the top 10%, you're so much more valuable to the organization. And so some of the tips and tools that we try to glean from the people that we interview can help you be in the top 10%. Today, we're going to talk with Pankaj Singh, and the title of this is The Empathy Edge. Master the human side of leadership. So that fits right in with what we're talking about in regards to emotional intelligence. And it's part of what Singh, as he goes by, um, is brings into the work that he does. So we're going to check in with him more about how he does that. Let me give you a little bit of information first, and then I'm going to give the bio in regards to Singh. And before I jump into that, Kathy, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm on the run today, so I'll be actually doing the show from my car because we have construction going on in the house that was unexpected. But I'm very excited about today's show because, as you know, mindfulness is at the heart
Yes.
of emotional intelligence. So I'm sure we're going to have a great show today with Singh.
Okay, great. Well, I'll do a little intro and then his intro. So, given what's going on today, what Kathy and I like to say is everything is more now. When you think about your life and what's going on, you have more anxiety, you have more apprehension, you have more chaos. You need more support. Gallup tells us that 75% of us agree, yeah, I need more support. And some of the things that we're going to get from Singh and how do we get more support? So, a big part of this is around emotional intelligence for any of our new listeners, understanding yourself, managing yourself, understanding others, managing others. Those are the four key components, and there's key competencies within all of that. And so, Singh, I'll do a little bit of your bio here. Um, Singh is a visionary leader. He spent over 20 years revolutionizing businesses and building high-performance teams. As a former C-suite executive, he's driven double-digit growth, streamlined operations, transformed organizations worldwide. But his real power comes from something unexpected. And Kathy told us about this, mindfulness. I'm a avid mindfulness practitioner, Singh, so I'm interested in hearing how you bring that in. He was raised in an affluent family in India. He mastered classical music by the age of 13 and then was restless. At 14, he was sent to train under a lama where he first discovered the profound impact of mindfulness. I'll be interested in Singh hearing a little bit more about that, how long you actually did train with them. And then fast forward to 2020, his passion for mindfulness and leadership ignited during the high pressure ransomware crisis that was early in his career. Faced with overwhelming stress, guiding his team through uncharted territories, he turned to mindfulness to anchor himself. That pivotal experience revealed the transformative power of presence, empathy, and emotional intelligence leadership, and it inspired his life mission to share these tools. He has a signature framework called the Ascendancy Action System, Mindfulness Leadership Mastery Compass. So we'll hear more about that. Singh, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Riley. And nice to meet you too, Dr. Kathy.
So we always start off. Go ahead, Cass.
No, I was just going to say we always start off the show by asking a little bit about how you got to where you are, who's influenced you, and uh, I mean, we all have this story, right? That we share called the bio, but there's so much that has influenced you in
Yeah.
your life, Sing. So maybe tell us what are some of the key people that have really made uh, an impact on you that sent you in this direction.
Oh, I think every individual that I have met has helped me to become what I am today. I'll start with that. Because even today, when I coach people, every experience, even this morning, I had two coaching sessions. Every experience that I have with an individual while I'm coaching them, I get to find more about me and my capacity and my individuality. But who I am, I guess it starts with my parents. Again, I'm going to age myself, but if I was born in today's era, I would be declared with at least 6 or 7 acronyms and medicines, if you will. But back in the day, we had kids only two ways, one who were disciplined and one who were not disciplined. So I was one of those undisciplined kid at age of 3. Uh, Me being hyper and affluent family, like I said, I was introduced to Indian percussion at that age, tabla, and I was very involved in that and kept me going till I was 13, and I already did postmasters in that. There was nothing new to learn, only to teach and play in events and stuff like that. Right at the age of 14, so it's a story where I went to give my examination, sixth class, and I did not write a single word in any paper. I just wrote my name and my roll number, and I came home. So the principal of the school knew my parents, and she's like, he's not that kid who does not know something. We need to do something about him. So again, we are in India. I grew up in India, and being an affluent family, I was introduced to, literally sent to Tibet in a monastery there, and I stayed there for 3 months.
Oh,
Uh, Coming out of there, I was a completely different person.
wow.
Completely different person. Um, I finished my schooling. I did my engineering. I started teaching in a school, and then I got married, moved here. I did my MBA, and then I took a very serious role with LaSalle Capital, became a partner there, and then we sold that company 2008. I took another role with another large organization. Um, all these things were going on. So the people who made every teacher that I have experience with in school or classroom, every manager that I have had, I have pulled up something, I have picked up something. Uh, the reason I say that is I have never used the word mindful or mindfulness or mindful practice till 2021.
Oh,
I used all the practices, but because of the woo-woo
okay.
attached with the word, I try to not use those words.
Yeah.
Um, Everything came in front of me as a flashback when I was chief technology officer and chief operating officer, and we had a ransomware attack in 2020. This is right in the middle of COVID. People are working from home mostly, right? So with the logistics and everything, ransomware itself is a big deal. And we were able to come out of that in 30 hours without paying ransom.
Hmm.
And what followed that was, of course, I was invited in a lot of different webinars to talk about at that time. Hey, how did you do it? What happened? And right around the fifth uh, webinar, I turned back and I'm like, okay, something is disconnecting here because what I did came naturally to me and my team. So I need to look back and see what exactly is the difference. And that's where I saw for last 4 decades, I have been teaching people mindful practices, micro practices on a daily basis, hourly basis, but I never use those terms. So, and I'll give these
Yeah.
tools to your listeners here. So the very first one I tell everyone is in that ransomware attack, I walked in my office, I pulled the 3 direct reports there and one guy on the phone, and I started with the same exercise that I have been doing with them for 2 years. We take out our notebook. or whatever you write on, the first question is, what do you want to get out of this conversation?
Ah, nice.
Right? So scientifically, what I'm doing is people who are running on autopilot in fight and flight mode,
Yeah.
by asking that question and it's specifically asking them to write 4 to 5 words, not more than that. I don't want an essay. That pulls your, you know, focus on the prefrontal cortex, right? That's your logical brain. So you are coming out of autopilot and starting to feel and work with your logical brain. And that's where the second question is, if you were not here, what else you would be doing that would be fulfilling for you,
Okay.
right? So now that is a question, having people to prioritize 200 things that you have on a daily basis. And when you are brought in a conversation, I need to understand what is a bigger priority for you than focusing here, right? And the
Yeah.
third question then is, if you were not here, who else would be qualified to do this?
Hmm.
Right? So right there, what you did is by asking that question, you broke two things. One is the feeling of overconfidence that I am the only person who can solve everything in the world, right? On the other side, you also help them to think if they are wasting their time or just being there for showcase and stuff like that. So during ransomware, when we got that, we had very clear, within 5 minutes, we had very clear scope for all five of us to do X, Y, and Z. And we plan to connect every hour, right? The other thing reminded them is, hey, always remember, I have trained you, I have taught you guys a lot of things. And one of them is what I call pivot, right? So anytime you feel uncomfortable, just remember pivot. What pivot is starts with pause, right? And at that time, everybody is working out of. We have never seen ransomware attack before, right? So we don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work. So not only that you are running on fight and flight mode, now there is extra pressure from everyone to get it a resolution. So pause is a very quick 30-second exercise, right? So pause. That is interrupting your automatic reactivity, right? Then investigate. Notice what's happening internally. Because every breath that you take, there's something happening internally. Validate and acknowledge your emotion. And one of the problem I was discussing with somebody, coaching somebody this morning is, as a humanity, we have shrunk or reduced our emotional vocabulary,
Yeah.
right? So being able to, and then own it, take responsibility of how you show up, and then transform, shift into the mindful action at that time, right? A simple word,
Yeah.
which really means to pivot in time. Sorry.
I just love what you're saying. And I see Relly smiling broadly. You have such a beautiful lyrical style of communicating. And I'm so attracted to this conversation. It's a very powerful conversation. And it sounds like you have so many tools, Sing, which is absolutely beautiful. When you first start working with people in a
Mhm.
leadership role, and you start to teach them this way of thinking and being,
Mhm.
it sounds like there is the same attraction on behalf of those people who are working with you. There's a beauty to this. There is a real power and beauty to this. Is that something that you can transfer to other people, or do you find that the magic sauce that makes you you?
I'm actually already working on transforming this because I can only sustain so many people. I can only work with so many people. So a couple of things that I have done, and it's already in progress. And I think hopefully in next week I will have everything launched together. One is with 4 decades of information and practices that I have already created a GPT that is now available. I'll put that in link here for you guys to try it out. You can start with a simple emotion and it starts to become very interactive for you in real time, right? So think about giving people access to a Google kind of thing where you start typing out anger and it real time shows you. I can show it to you here on, but
Yeah.
beyond this, that's the one thing I've done. The second thing I've done is I've created three communities for people to now come on the community and not just wait on me, but they are digital courses that people can go through. All these tools are there that people can go through. And then the third thing that I have put out there, again, it's going to come live here shortly, is I talked about emotional vocabulary, right? So in mindful practice, and especially I got trained in the very old traditional, uh, I was blessed, I would say. I always say that it's a blessing for me that I had an opportunity to train under people who are the masters of mindfulness meditation in a very different level, right? So the 4 decades of information, I have put it through a system and created 230 different micro practices that you can practice depending on which emotion you have.
Mm. So that's pretty cool. And so yeah, definitely put that in the chat and we can check it out and then we'll basically tell our audience about that. Um, so we're going to go to break in a moment, but I'm very attracted as Kathy is. I've been a practitioner of mindfulness uh, s- since I just got out of college, and so that's a long time, and so I do it daily. Tell me kind of what's your daily practice look like? And I think I'm going to let you think about that for a moment because we're going to take a break. But so what does that look like? And I know there's a lot of research about mindfulness and meditation and the idea of whether it's 20 minutes or then there's 5 minutes or 3 minutes. And how do you make it a daily practice? Because we have people going back to what we said earlier, everything is more. I don't have time for this. I don't have time. It's going to take too much time. So that'll be the question thing that we'll leave you with. So we're going to go to our break now. Go ahead.
Mhm.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News. We're having a powerful and engaging conversation with our guest today. And, we have been talking about the power of the pivot. And I sadly interrupted you, Singh, when you were talking about those four different behaviors of mindfulness. So, why don't we finish that before we jump into the 14-week program that you're running? Because I would love to jump into that program. So, tell us about the pivot again.
So again, the pivot, I'll try to simplify it. The P stands for pause and presence, right? And that's very critical because the only and I every time I have a conversation, the first time I always say the most fundamental thing that biologically declares you alive or dead is your breath, right? Except for coma, right? I hope nobody is in coma, but we have forgotten how critical the breath is. And the moment, as simple as box breathing, right? You take a deep 4 count inhalation, stop 4 count inhalation, release 4 count exhalation, and then stop for another 4 counts. When you do it 3 times, you will feel pressure right in the center of your head, right? And in the forehead, right? What's happening is the presence is activating prefrontal cortex, which is your logical brain. The moment you do that, then it's I for identify what's happening, right? And this is another thing that I'm having to teach people is learn to reflect, not react all the time. Learn to reflect. The moment you do that and look at your emotion, name that emotion, right? Because when my kid was young, of a couple of years, I gave him a soft toy, and he named it Bob. Guess what? 20 years later, even Bob is today in our conversation. So the moment you name emotions, your brain knows it's not to fight anymore. It's something that it recognizes. That's why expanding the vocabulary, emotional vocabulary is so important, right? Then V is to verify your values. What matters most here? And sometimes I tell executive leaders all the time, two things. One, no matter what you do, the sky is not going to literally fall. I can guarantee you that. So you need to validate if you have to make that decision right now, right? Just because you are known to make decision does not mean you have to make decision in rest, right? And the second thing I always ask them is no matter what decision you make, there is a human on the other side of that decision, even if it is 10 steps down. So what are the values that you will be having by in that decision, right? And the O stands for own the opportunity, right? We have to be responsible for what we do, right? Own that opportunity to shift from victimhood to becoming the agency. Reframe the challenge to an opportunity, right? That's what it means by owning the opportunity. And then take intentional action.
So what's so cool about this, um, Kathy's smiling too. Kathy and I have a parallel tool, and especially around emotional intelligence, called NAME, NAME. And name is notice and name the emotion, just like you said. The A is accept the emotion. And sometimes we'll walk people through that. And I usually would say that's the hardest one. And then the M is manage. And so not only manage your thoughts, but manage your actions. So that's where you really
Mhm.
get to where you're talking about, and we have a bunch of actions, a bunch of, things around thinking and about actions that can help manage the emotion. So that's the M. And then the E is express. Do
Mm.
you express it? And if so, who do you express it to? Sometimes you just do it to yourself. Sometimes you just write in a journal. And often, if you express it, we may express it to the wrong person. Here, we've identified the emotion, we've accepted it, and one of our actions is to tell someone, and they don't really hear. They don't really listen to us. And so
Right.
there's a lot of actions in there. So really parallel information, and that's why both Kathy and I are excited about that. Plus, we love acronyms. So, so the pivot is great.
So
So
I'm going back to your question first. Let me, that's very important. And I speak to this all the time that, okay, Singh, you taught me pivot. That is in the moment. But as soon as I turn around, I'm going to get hijacked by my calendar, right? And it happens with everyone all the time. So that's where I not only give them the pivot, I also introduce them to what I say is mindful compass. And what mindful compass really is, it's four pieces to your life in every moment, right? The very first one is presence power. I just talked about breathing. I just want talked about being present. I mean, how many times and people ask tell me, right? Oh, I'm always present. My first question, if it's morning, I ask, okay, did you tell your spouse I love you before you left? And they say, oh yeah, I did. That's okay. Miss you, baby. So what did it really feel like? What was she wearing? What was she smiling or not? What was her facial expressions? So saying what we mean without being present is the most discerning thing you can do to humanity, right? Because the moment you bring your presence in the current, you have the ability to manage your emotions. Like you said, name the emotion, right? Navigating emotion with skill is easier if you can name and correlate it to what it is.
Right.
The moment you can name your emotion, the very first thing scientifically that happens in your brain, your prefrontal cortex engages and you get cognitive clarity,
Hmm. Right.
right?
And
Now, once you have,
that, I was just going to say, Sing, that makes perfect sense because so happiness and the power of positivity is in the front left part of the brain. So that's what you're doing when you're forcing somebody to be present and you're asking them to be aware of the actions, the smiles, the voice, the visual of somebody else, right? You're now engaging
Mhm.
that beautiful left frontal hemisphere. So very powerful.
Right. And if you do that, then you can take compassionate action. So autopilot is going to happen. There is no way, unless you get to a certain level of practice, autopilot is going to happen. That's we have the worst thing that the digital explosion has done is it has fed so much information to us. There is 24/7 so much signals coming in that the laziest part of our body, which is the brain, right, just lets you run on autopilot, right? Now, if you step back and say, what is broadly, what's the problem with that, right? So, broadly, what is the problem with that? Well, broadly, the problem is if I step back and say, Dr. Kathy, what was your last meal? Dinner, breakfast. And then I said, okay, what did that taste like? What did that feel like? What was the texture? What was the temperature? See, you don't remember. So the brain does not remember more than 80% of the experience we had because when we are having the experience, we are not present there, right? In this conversation, I will never forget what this air is feeling like to me. I will never forget, right? The greenery behind Raleigh, right? I can never forget your car. So why? Because I am present here with my logical brain to respect the conversation that we are having, right? So how injustice are we with people we love and live with?
So, we got a lot here to digest. So I do want to go back to for a daily, what does mindfulness look like? And then I do then maybe we can go to your mindful hear the rest of the mindful compass. So what does that look like in your day as far as mindfulness, and how long is that? We're trying to just make this as practical as we can for people.
So the micro practices that I ask people to do is anything between 30 seconds and 2 minutes, small practices. But I encourage them to do it 5 to 6 times in the day so they can start training their brain to be in the present. So meditation, the problem with teaching people meditation is a lot of meditation is taught as visualization, but the true essence of meditation is not visualization, right? When we say that, okay, sit down and think about where you are, this is that, that is visualization exercise, not a meditation. Meditation really is to let go of everything. The brain is already capturing every senses through you. Being mindful is becoming appreciative of all the signals coming in your brain and trying to understand what it is, trying to listen what it is. And really, I do this exercise a lot when I meet with people in cafeteria or in a lunch or breakfast, something like that. I will give them this 45-second breathing thing with their eyes closed, and then I will ask them, okay, now I want your attention on your ears and listen to all the voices.
Right.
You won't believe the moment you do that, people listen to 20 things that otherwise they are not putting their attention on.
Right.
So my point being, mindful exercise does not mean that you sit down on a yoga mat for 12 hours. No, mindful presence means that how you can be appreciative of every breath.
Yeah.
The longer you can do in your day, the better for you.
And I love that, one of the exercises that goes along with your saying is what they say is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What are 5 things you can see? What are 4 things that you can hear? What are
Mhm.
3 things that you can smell? I mean, so you get the idea. It's kind of exactly what you're saying, but it directs people to be more aware because if you stay on autopilot, you stay average. And so
Right.
for all of us, these are some things that can enhance where you're going.
The problem that the brain has, and I want to make sure that our audience remembers this. And going back to our friends, Kahneman and Schwartz and all these wonderful people who've taught us, the brain has to do a lot of work just keeping us alive,
Right.
keeping our lungs going, keeping our eyes functioning, our ears, right? All of our senses, uh, movement, coordinated movement, our fingers, uh, just spending the time our body spends on function doesn't give it a lot of freedom to do multiple tasks that drain it. So the
Uh,
brain is doing its job by saying, I'm only capable of doing this much in a day. I have to do about 34,000 thoughts a day. And if I have 34,000 thoughts in addition to doing all this work to keep you functioning, I got to be real selective about where I'm going to spend my attention. So that mediocre, that let me just cruise
Cruise.
it's a coping mechanism,
Right.
right? And so we got to snap that brain out of its coping mechanism to say, hey, hello, we have work to do.
So there's a hack I'll share with you on that, right? So training the brain, and that's most important thing for us to learn. Um, do 3 things that typically your brain is not expecting your body to do, right? One is without shoes or sandal, move the fingers on your leg up and down. Your if you think about when we walk, our fingers don't move on the leg, stays as firm as possible with the sole. But if you intentionally try to move the fingers on your leg, on your leg, on your feet, the fingers on your feet, right? And try to alternate with your hands, your brain is not expecting the fingers on your foot to move, right? So that tells the brain, okay, there's something new coming my way.
So
Other,
just if people were trying this, you're just using the word fingers, but you're talking about your toes.
yeah, toes, yeah,
You're trying to move your toes and your hands and so the pinky toe and the pinky finger, you're trying to
right,
align those. Is that right?
right, that's right.
Okay, that I like that. That's good.
Yeah, but don't do that when you're driving.
Yeah, don't do when you're driving or you have shoes on. It does not work. The other quick thing is the nose, the nostrils, right? You try to blow it like this. Just you see my nose moving?
Oh yeah, so you got your nostrils going up and down and try to do that. Yeah, so all these things are around attention and focus. And I know that's a big deal that we always talk about because if we're on autopilot, we're not paying attention. So how do we use that focus and being intentional about what we're focusing on?
So the program that we have mindful journey, it's really a 14-week intensive, right? The way we have organized it is the first 2 weeks is orientation and foundation. That's where I have borrowed the purpose factor assessment from the purpose company because it fits. Okay, let me step back. So the framework that I use for the entire program is called Progress, Progress, right? So purpose, reflection, organizing. Those are the three key things. Then grit, resilience, empowerment, self-improvement, and support. So from grit to support are things that you have to do to go from point A to point B, but purpose, reflection, and organizing is to define what the point B is and how to get there. So it all starts with purpose factor assessment, where we deep dive into individual, what they are, and create that what is a paradigm. They are doing something, they want to excel in that, or they're doing something and they want to pivot and change to do something else, right? That's the two paradigm that people live in. So going through purpose factor assessment, we very quickly help them in the second week itself. We teach them how to harmonize your daily reset ritual, right? And the two things we give them, one is 478 breath work to help them understand how to live their life.
Right.
And then the other thing that we give them is heart framework. So what heart framework really is: harmonize, examine, align, um, respond, and track. So that is something that we teach people how they can harmonize their heart, right, to connect to the prefrontal cortex in any moment that you want. Then the third week, we go into emotional awareness and regulation. That's where we talk about, there's a couple of other frameworks that we give them on how to expand your emotional vocabulary. I use the emotional wheel all the time in that and help them do that. And that's when we get into the examining your inner narrative. The fourth week is where we are defining, okay, A to B, how do I get that? What people, why it takes 2 weeks to do that is I mentioned earlier, people have forgotten how to reflect. So every week I have to give them assignments to be able to reflect back and document and then train their brain to reflect in pieces. Once we have done that, then we go into your organizing life. Two things to that. One is your mindset organization, and second is your relationship organization, right? So relationship organization is the compass, the book I just published, Circle Up. Compass stands for 7 relationship that you should have both in individual and family.
All right, I'm going to ask you to pause right there, Singh, because we have to take a quick break. But
So
that'll give you a chance to really think about where we're going to go with this audience. So don't go away. Come right back. You're listening to Leadership Development News.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practices of Top Performers. We are talking with Singh, who has given us some tools and practices to be a top performer. And a lot of this is from his skills and upbringing of mindfulness and making this into some practices. So we just talked about during the break, we said earlier, no one has time. And so what are the micro practices? And first, his contact is Singh, Singh, at singleadership.com. Singh. You talked about having a GPT with micro practice. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about if people go to your site, do they get it at your site? And then and what's behind that? What can people do with the GPT?
Sure. So I was sharing with somebody this morning, and it's very fresh. So the GPT is nothing but I have taken my knowledge and exercises and scripts and everything for from last 4 decades. I trained the model, and the way it is trained is it is designed. You can start GPT fresh and just write any emotion that you have at that time, or you want to know about an emotion. It gives you a very systematic definition of what that emotion means. And if you have that emotion physically, how it should be manifesting on your body.
Hmm.
What are the different organs on your body that you will feel toughness, tightness, stiffness, or you will feel light and stuff like that. And then it also has give you three questions at the end, depending on the question that you have asked. The first question will be to try to dig more into your emotional vocabulary to give you better answer. The second will be it will give you a quick micro practice that you can immediately use that in that 30 seconds there. And the third, it'll ask you to show the funny thing I've done is now it will be giving you a facial expression with that emotion for a male and a female.
Hmm.
Gorgeous.
So, so it's really an interactive tool for anyone to play with, to understand their own emotions, or if you're working with someone, right? I mean, think about it, right? You are walking, you've just come out of a meeting and you thought that your boss or your manager was acting a particular way, and you write those words in the GPT. GPT tells you exactly what's below that. Because remember, the emotional expressions that we are giving is not because that is what we have, it's because something we don't have.
We don't have a full understanding of what that emotion is, which leads us to the whole role of emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
And you talk about data with dignity in your material. You also talk about the fact that a lot of people need more emotional intelligence. And you say if every leader could adopt one emotionally intelligent habit tomorrow, what would you recommend and why?
I would recommend pivot that I already explained before,
Right.
right? Because in the moment, I have seen that work every time with anyone, no matter who it is, right? I think one of the questions that you asked earlier, what we are seeing as some of the patterns, and why pivot works in every single pattern. So, in my experience in last 5 years or 3 years at least, there are three things that I'm seeing very common. The first one, I say, I have called it leadership grid cycle. It is a leadership grid cycle because it's fatigue, frustration, it's repeated obstacles, not necessarily that they have created, but just because of the patterns that they have created around them. So even though they think they are grinding, but the problem is that they're grinding without reflection, right? They don't have any support, but they have the martyr mindset that I am the only one who can do this. Nobody else can do this without me, right? So that's the leadership grid cycle, I say. The second one I always encourage people to open up is the vulnerability loop, right? Shame, self doubt, and fear of exposure. So you're toughing out because you don't want to show, you feel ashamed to share your vulnerability, right? And then the third one is stress, overwhelm, anxiety, and urgency, which, if you think about it, they are craving for transformation. They're just not clear how to get started.
Yep. I can see that. I can see that clearly when you speak it in that framework. You also talk about some trends that you're seeing in industries like insurance and healthcare.
Mhm.
And I think when you say business process outsourcing, BPO, which is a little bit of a different industry, you're seeing some trends in emotional intelligence. Can you share with us what that looks like?
Um, so the very first thing I would say is resentment and compassion fatigue.
Hmm.
That's the very first thing I always see that, right? So people are emotionally disengaged, even with themselves, right? And because of that, there is poor interpersonal decision or discussion, which leads to big time micromanagement, right? So that's one trend. If you see one of those things, all three is happening, I can guarantee you,
So the
right?
micromanagement feels like control. Like this
Right.
person is such a control freak.
And why it is control freak? Because they have emotionally disengaged,
Mhm.
right? I talked about martyr syndrome. So they are emotionally disengaged and they think they are the only one who knows everything. If they don't do it, everything is going to fly down, right?
Right. And
In healthcare specifically, because of two things, I mean, COVID was there, but lack of resources and lack of automated systems. That way, the business process optimization and automation is to be able to help them automate things that make sense, so they don't have to do the same redundant thing again and again and again. The trend there is that of, I would not say self doubt, but it's more defensive, right?
Yeah.
They become very defensive very quickly. Everybody is on the edge, not just because of long working hours, but the brain fatigue
right.
that happens when you're emotionally disengaged in what you're doing.
Yeah.
I would imagine that the with all that's going on right now with the flight professionals, especially what's going on with these airlines not having the right level of equipment to be able to protect the flights that are coming in and out of certain areas like we've seen on the East Coast with Newark shutting down, that is an area that we'll start to see that behavior in because they haven't had an upgrade right to their infrastructure and their systems for years and years and years.
It's interesting you brought that specific profession. So I always give example on my podcast. I give example of Captain Scully all the time,
Right.
the one who landed his plane, right? And something that I learned studying him and what happened is uh, three different very unique uh, sides you will see. Uh, Hyper responsibility, because they're responsible for people on the plane, right? To controlled calmness,
Hmm.
right? That's very first thing, that they have to go
Right.
from hyper responsibility to controlled calmness, right? The second is situational awareness fatigue, because they're looking at so many information coming through to make that fraction of second judgment. There's always that situational awareness fatigue that needs to be translated to emotional agility,
Hmm.
right? And then the third thing is performance perfectionism, because every single flight has to be perfect or they crash, right? That needs to transfer into constructive resilience.
Yeah.
It's a
So,
lot going on.
and especially when you listen to the Sully uh, video that you can get a hold of, that situational awareness. They say, all right, so let's, turn right to go to Teterboro, and he basically says, we're not going there, and we're landing landing in the Hudson, and the folks are saying, what? So that, and but also that sense of calmness and that
Mhm.
sense of practice, is pretty incredible. So your data with dignity and from your coaching, talk about that kind of, we know kind of what the about the data, but yeah, put those two together and how do you bring that into your coaching?
Um, So most of the people I teach or coach are leaders or groups or emerging leaders, right? One thing I start with is there's nothing in life that does not starts and ends with data, including our breath, our blood pressure, our hypertension, whatever you want to look at it. And dignity is to be aware of what the measures are and you're respectfully accepting it,
Okay.
right? Let the data and information tell you the story of what you're doing wrong with you. Don't try to justify otherwise.
Yeah.
And I'll give you example. Okay, I can walk 10,000 miles or 10,000 steps and I will be well. No, if you walk 10,000 steps, your feet will be well. That does not have anything to do with your emotional wellness. Yes, if you do that amount of walking, your prefrontal cortex and your chemicals in your brain definitely help you, but it's more than just taking 10,000 steps in a day. If I drink 8 glasses of water, I will be hydrated. No, your hydration is water is only a part of your hydration. 80% of our body is built of water. You should not feel dehydrated to begin with, right? You're doing something. So that's where data with dignity is. Don't try to take measures, whatever measurement it is, whether it is your report that you look at from a financial standpoint or the data that you see from your medical standpoint,
Yeah.
right? Respect the information because that information captured in time is not your enemy.
Right. Right. So I
So
think,
take context. You have to
yeah.
take it in context. Well, we're about ready here to say goodbye. That was a fast hour.
That was good.
Let me
So
make sure it has your website, really, and then I'll let you close here. Did you emphasize the word let? I'll let you close. Did you both like that? Um, so go to www.sing, SINGH, powerupcoach.com to learn all about what Singh is up to and to get more information, I'm sure, about his chat GPT. And let's not forget that he has a brand new book out that we're also very excited about. And tell us the name of the book again, Singh, before we say goodbye.
So the name of the book is Circle Up.
and is it just how soon is it just come out?
It came out about 4 weeks now. It's
Oh,
another
okay.
international bestseller.
So we can get a hold of that at your website. So we got 2 minutes, so we're going to do our lightning round, and I'm just going to ask you, you fill in the blank, and it's lightning because it's fast. Leadership is,
Mindset,
all right. At work, it's all about,
emotions,
and the best way you recharge during the workday is,
take deep breath.
okay, and that's part of the pivot. And Kathy and I are excited about that. It certainly parallels to all the work that we've done, similar focus on let people be present, because if you stay on autopilot, you stay average, and nobody wants to be average. And so some of the things that you're saying are going to help us all be exceptional. So you've been listening to Leadership Development News. Continue to tune up your performance.